Brewers and beer lovers, we are back for 2026, and today we are kicking off the year with a bang. This right here is a traditional, authentic 19th century double decoction mash Vienna Lager. So come and taste a little bit of history with us as we show you how we have made this incredibly delicious and historically accurate beer. Let's get started. To make our delicious double decoction Vienna Lager, we are actually going to take a slight back step and keep things relatively simple on the malt bill. When you do make Vienna Lagers, it's very common to use up to say 90% Vienna malt and then use a combination of different dextrin malts or carafoams or sometimes melanoidin malts, crystal malts, etc., which is all totally fine. It's also very common to use a percentage or two of chocolate malt to darken up the color a bit. However, what I want to do today is go a little bit more traditional. If we're going double decoction, I want to go and bring it back to its roots. So, with that being said, I am going to be using 100% Vienna malt, 8 kilos of the stuff to be exact. That in freedom units for the Americans in our audience, going to show up all throughout the screen throughout the day because I just can't do those conversions in my head. Sorry guys. But now let's go ahead and throw these all into the mill. What we're looking for with this malt though is that classic toastiness, biscuitiness, and that malt sweetness. That is just such an indefinable character. So hard to describe, but you know it when you taste it. Let's throw it in and get crushing. And I've just realized I haven't plugged in the grain mill. Give me a second. Grain mill's on, and away we go. Works first time. Right, milling is done. Let's talk water chemistry. This is where things do start to get interesting because modern Vienna lagers are chasing somewhat softer profiles than what was available in the late 1800s, 19th century. And they certainly chase more of a malt-driven profile now, so more chloride to sulfate type of ratios. However, when this was originally being brewed in 19th century Vienna, part of the reason why they started utilizing Vienna malt was that A, based on their water source available, they were noticing that it was quite difficult to brew pale beers because the ending pH was still residing a little too high. However, after utilizing more kilned and more roasted barley, such as Vienna malt, it was helping to drop that pH and increase some of the acidity. However, the water profile at the time was actually really strong on the bicarbonate front and stronger on sulfate rather than chloride in terms of that all-important balance of ratio. So what we are going to be using today is what is a more close approximation of the available water source in 19th century Vienna, which means we are going to be running with 35 parts per million of calcium, 16 of magnesium, 17 of sodium, 31 of chloride, 66 of sulfate, and 112 parts per million of bicarbonate. All of this does sound a little bit wacky, and to be honest, if I was probably trying to produce the best possible Vienna that I could make, I would flip the roles a little bit with that sulfate to chloride, and I would massively reduce that bicarbonate. But what we're doing today is trying to go back to the classics, and I want to brew what would have been a close approximation of the true 19th century original Vienna Lager. So we're going to roll the dice and see how this one turns out. Let's mash in. Right, mashing time. Now, the mash in for today is going to start relatively simply. We are just going to throw in our full 8 kilos of crushed Vienna malt into the mash tun. Where things are going to get more complicated after this is the actual mash process. So this initial mash phase is going in at 64 degrees Celsius. We're going to hold it at 64 degrees for a total of half an hour. However, the key difference here is that we're going to be doing a double decoction mash. So after these grains have sat stewing at 64 degrees C for about 10 minutes, I'm going to extract about 1/3 of the grain bill and begin our decoction mashing. But I'll talk about more of that in a moment. For now, let's bliss this stuff. I cannot stress enough, by the way, just how easy the paint mixer makes mashing in. If you want one of these, link down below. We have an affiliate program with Kegland for all of this kind of stuff, so costs you nothing, but it gives us a little kickback to keep making content. Easy as that, that is mashing done. I'm now gonna let this sit for 10 minutes before we kick off decoction number 1. Now, if you wanna have a good chuckle at my expense, there's a link to a video right up here, which was my first attempt at decoction mashing, and it was an absolute failure. Just about everything that could go wrong in a brew day went wrong in that brew day. That was a Marzen that we made for Oktoberfest about 2 years ago. So go have a little good laugh at my expense there if you'd like. But there's a few key tips that I want to share with you guys when it comes to decoction mashing to help make your lives a little less painful than mine was. But we'll come back in 10. Here we go with decoction number 1. I'm going to stop that pump for a moment. And what have I done here? I've made things complicated for myself by adding the attachment. Don't need you for now. Let's get rid of you. Beautiful, lid comes off. All right. Where's my spoon? What you'll need for this is a great big spoon. It's an incredibly complex tool, but it does the job. And the goal here, by the way, is that we are looking for a fairly thick mash. What I mean by that is we're looking for a pretty decent ratio of grain to water to really get an effective decoction going. So I'm just gonna keep on scooping until I feel like I've gathered enough. Oh, by the way, you might be wondering why I've added so much water, and this was 40 liters of strike water for comparatively only 8 kilos of grain, which seems insane, and I agree with you. But the reason for that is because you lose so much liquid when you do decoction mashing. Like so much through evaporation because you're boiling the mash grains in the decoction. So much through like transferring back and forth, having open vessels, not having lids on. So to compensate for that, and from my learning from last time I did this, which was a double decoction mash Czech Pilsner, probably my best beer I've ever made, like just hands down. I freaking love that beer, and unfortunately it's just run out on tap. So I'm hoping this Vienna Lager can be a suitable replacement for it. But what I learned from that was, yes, compensate, add extra water than you think you need, because you're gonna have a whole lot more evaporation than you are used to. Man, I'm struggling to get thick mash here. I'm getting quite a lot of liquid for the amount of grain I'm scooping. Probably should have worn my heat-proof gloves. There we go, I found the grain. I found it. We're getting somewhere. We're cooking with gas now. This is like brewing on maximum difficulty level, by the way, trying to decoction mash by yourself, end film. So, fuck you, Odin. You had to go and get a Monday to Friday job, 9 to 5. Ooh. Gonna pop this back on. All right, cut back in from here. We have now got my gas burner running. I've done this before with an induction cook plate, but my pot's too cheap and the bottom warps when it gets hot. So gas for the win. And now we are gonna stir and keep on stirring and not stop stirring for the next 15 minutes while we cook this thing up to a boil. Hey Siri, set a timer for 15 minutes.
15 minutes, counting down.
Siri's on the ball. See, who needs a brew day partner when you've got Siri and a tripod? Odin. Comments down below. This is now the second brew day in a row that he is missing. Does not go unnoticed by the YouTube fan base. But from here on out, guys, just keep spinning, don't stop spinning, because if you do, the grains at the bottom of the pot are gonna get cooked and burn, and then that scorched flavor is gonna go straight back into your beer, and nobody wants that. So keep on stirring, 15 minutes straight. At the end of that 15 minutes, we should be coming up to time with when this main mash is gonna hit its next phase in the brewing cycle, and I should probably get that recirculation going. That's when this will hit its next phase in the brewing cycle, and we'll be ready to move on to step mash number 2. So I've got a bit of exercise to do. I'll come back to you in a minute. Right, that is the end of our first decoction, which means it's time for me to add all of this back to the main mash. So let's try and do this without burning myself. Should probably put some gloves on. Would be the smart move. All right, and in it all goes. Might flush this out with some fresh wort, get all of that grainy goodness in there. Beautiful. Okay, now, just as with before, I'm now gonna let this sit for about another 10 minutes now that this is sitting at 70 degrees Celsius for our second step in the mash, and then we'll kick off decoction number 2. Now for decoction number 2. And as I do this, I've realized it's probably worth talking about why anybody would bother going through all of this work. Like, it's much easier to just pick a temperature, throw your grains in, and Bob's your uncle. The answer for the 19th century brewers over in Vienna, and broadly speaking across most of Europe, is pretty simple. It's logistics. They didn't have fancy stainless steel with set control panels, electric powering, and all the control that comes with modern equipment. And those older brewers, our forefathers, did realize that step mashing led to more efficient conversions with beer. It could make drier, crisper finishing beers. It could lead to more alcohol. It could change the mouthfeel. It could change the flavor. But they didn't have the ability to step mash the way we do by selecting a temperature on a piece of equipment and letting it run wild. So their way to compensate for this was to decoction mash. By taking out a third of their grain, boiling it, and then adding it back into the main mash, they realized that raised the temperature to just about the right level to hit these different step mashes. And little did they know probably at the time when they were first doing this, but what they were actually doing was activating different enzymes, with your beta enzymes being around that 64 degrees Celsius, your alpha enzymes being around that 70 degrees Celsius, and ultimately leading to a far more efficient conversion on your beer. So that's the reason why they did it. The side effect of all of this is that it actually led to a whole different color development in the beer, a whole different flavor development, and that is called the melanoidin effect. Why am I about to stir with this? What am I doing? Obviously, I can't talk and do things at the same time. The melanoidin effect. So that led to different melanoidins being, sorry, the Maillard effect is what I was looking for there. I'm so lost when I'm trying to do two things at once. Maillard reactions are what you're looking for, and they create melanoidins. What that effectively is the caramelization of sugars at extreme temperatures. Because of that caramelization, it leads to a darkening of the color of the final product, but it also leads to very rich and vibrant flavor development. And this isn't just with things like brewing. This is like when you cook a steak on a frying pan and you sear it real hot at the end and you get that nice crust developing, that beautiful brown bronzed crust. That is, that's melanoidins, and that's from the Maillard reactions. So basically, boiling this way, boiling a portion of your grains at each of these different steps leads to much more flavor. Now, in modern brewing, our grain development has advanced to the extent that you can actually just buy melanoidin malts, and it's basically gonna give you the exact same thing. Here's the kicker though. Because it's kilned at a specific temperature and done a specific way to create melanoidins in the malt, it doesn't quite have that realness about it. It gets you very, very close, but there's, what's the right descriptor? There's a depth of flavor that's slightly missing, and there's just no other way to replace that. You can't cheat it. It's the same way that you can put gelatin into lagers to help clarify them, but it never really has the same effect of cleaning up the palate the way that lagering, true lagering actually does. Same thing with melanoidins. You can get very, very close. You can get like 95% of the way there with a melanoidin malt. But there's something to be said for doing things the traditional way, because the actual process itself, doing it with the grains in the boiler as you're mashing, just has slight nuances to the way that these flavors are developed that you can't replicate by buying a melanoidin grain. Anyway, I digress. What we're gonna do here is another 15 minutes of mixing while we boil. At the end of that, we'll add this back to the main mash, and then we'll be getting towards the end of our hour of mashing. And that brings us to the end of the final decoction. If you really like rich, malty flavors, that extra sweetness and that extra, I guess, just indescribable character that comes along with decoction mashing and creating melanoidins, then by all means, do a third decoction. However, for the purpose of today, I think 2 is enough, as is that Vienna malt is already going to give us quite a lot of rich flavor and character. So I'm going to end it with the second decoction. And let's flush this out again, get that extra grain back in the mash tun. And now I'm gonna let this carry on through the mash out. So I'm gonna bump up the temperature of my mash tun to 77 degrees Celsius to kill all the enzyme activity. And we will let that run for about 15 minutes before we kick off with sparging. We are now sparging. We have finished our mash out, our enzymes are neutralized, and now we begin the process of wringing out the sponge. So if you're new to brewing, welcome. So glad you could join us. It's an amazing and wonderful community and hobby. But what we're doing right now is running hot water over the top of our grain bed, whilst our grain bed is draining out all of its hot sugary liquid called wort into the boiler itself. The result of this is something called fly sparging. So what we are doing is running hot water over the top at the same rate that that water is flowing out. And the result of that is squeezing out all of those extra sugars that are currently trapped inside the grains, because we want those sugars in our beer. Oh, it's going to become our beer. It's basically just a way to increase your efficiency. Not necessary, highly recommended. By the way, all the different steps and all the processes from today are going to be in the recipe and the link down below in our description. So don't feel the need to have to try and remember all of this stuff. You can follow along with the actual written recipe as well if you'd like. I am doing, I think it was 25 liters of sparge water. I've already added my phosphoric acid to reduce the pH and added in my water salts as well. So we're all accounted for with our water chemistry. After I've finished running out this 25 liters, then we can move on to boiling and talk about hops. We are now boiling, which means we can get to some of the fun stuff, which is going to be our hops. Today, for our, that is not the right one, here it is. Today, for our 60-minute edition, God, I'm all over the place. 60-minute edition of boil hops, we're going to be using 79 grams / 2.8 ounces of Tettnanger into the boil that goes. And that's going to give us 11.3 IBUs. This strain of Tettnanger only has 2.4% alpha acid, I think from memory, which is incredibly low. So we're going to need quite a few additions today to get us up to the IBU range that we're actually chasing. That's addition number 1. We'll come back with 30 minutes left in the boil for addition number 2. 30 minutes down, 30 minutes to go, and time for another 56 grams / 2 ounces of Tettnanger. Into the boil they go. That's going to give us an additional 6 IBUs. And I suppose now's as good a time as any to talk about why Tettnanger. And the answer is, again, really simple. We're going for a style of recipe that would have been possible to brew back in like the late 1800s. So, because of that, our options are actually quite limited. It really does have to be noble hop varieties, and the most popular noble hops that were available in 19th century Vienna were things like Tettnanger and Saaz. Would have done Saaz, but I've used Saaz a lot lately. As much as I love it, it's time for a little bit of a switch up. So Tettnanger is going to give us that herbal quality, that slight spice quality, and it's just going to give us that classic, for lack of better words, beer-flavored beer quality that we all know and love. In 20 minutes, we'll come back for another hop edition. And once again, another round of Tettnanger. This time, whoop, that's an alarm for the other beer. This time, 87 grams / 3 ounces of the stuff, which is going to give us 4.3 IBUs. Once again, slowly clawing our way up to our final IBU count. In 5 minutes, we add more. And in goes the final hop edition of today, and from this being a 5-minute hop edition as well as that previous 10-minute edition is where we're going to get the majority of our actual hop character coming through the beer. The 30-minute and the 1 hour are really just for bittering, but this is really what's going to give us that herbal, floral, and slightly spicy punch that Tettnanger is so good at. Now, this is giving us an additional 0.8 IBUs, but bringing up us to a grand total of 22 IBUs. Oh, that was 28 grams, 1 ounce, by the way. So, total of 250 grams of hops, which is, I don't know, whatever that is in ounces up there, and 22 IBUs total. In 5 minutes, we'll start cooling this thing down, and then we can talk about yeast. And finally, it is time to pitch our yeast. Now, this is the one piece of this recipe that is a little bit less traditional than it should be for 2 reasons. One, I could not get my hands on a traditional Vienna yeast strain fast enough. Difficult here in Australia, don't have access to a ton of those more traditional European yeast options, at least I haven't been able to find them. And 2, this is a pretty fair approximation of a yeast strain that they likely would have had access to, because this is Budweiser yeast, the same one that I used for the double decoction mash Czech Pilsner. And seeing as the regions are so close together and they brew such a similar style of beer, it's a pretty fair bet that this would have been something similar to what they would have been using for this particular lager strain. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and pitch this one in, and I hope that this yeast is nice and healthy, because I did order it a little while ago. I pitched that at 23 degrees Celsius, which is a tad on the warm side, but my logic is, I only have 1 pack of this, I should probably be pitching 2, so pitching a little bit warm might help to get that yeast a bit more active, a bit faster. Now, that is it for this thing. I'm gonna close her up, ferment under no pressure, and just keep that fermentation temperature around 12 degrees Celsius, nice and cool for lagering conditions. After about 2 weeks, I suspect we should be nearing our final gravity, at which point I'll start bumping up by 1 to 2 degrees over the course of 2 days to do a bit of a diacetyl rest before finishing off with a cold crash. So the next time you guys see me will be with a fresh pint of Vienna Lager. Me again, beer is not finished, but I did just forget to say that original gravity wound up being 1.047. So I used my refractometer first, didn't really trust the reading, it was coming out 1.04, which is the same as the pre-boil. So then just tested it with my hydrometer, used the calculator on theflyingwombat.com.au to adjust for temperature, and 1.047 was the original gravity. If you guys ever need to use calculators for your brewing, there's a bunch of them on our website you can check out in the link down below. But it is a great reminder for me to get a new refractometer, because this one is definitely not accurate anymore. Now you'll see me with a fresh pint. And here is the final result. First thing I have to say is, yes, it's not 100% clear yet. It's relatively clear. It has been lagering for about 6 weeks, which on most lagers generally is enough time. However, what I have noticed with double decoction beers is that because you disturb the grain bed so much throughout the mash, you end up with a much hazier beer at the end of it, and it takes a lot longer for all of that to settle out fully. So I think in another month, this is gonna be brilliantly clear, but it's not quite there yet. But I couldn't wait any longer to release this video for you guys. Let's go in for the taste so I can talk about the stats. There's just something about double decoctioning, guys. Like, I know I've harped on about it a lot through this video. I harped on it about the Czech Pilsner, but there is something special about a double decoction that you just can't replicate in any other way. Melanoid and malts get you close. They don't get you all the way to this level of complexity. If you've never done it before, carve out a day to do a double decoction brew day. I promise you, the results are worth it. The results of this one here came out at 5%, 22 IBUs, 5% above target, but still within the realms of historical accuracy, as is the 22 IBUs being on target. The flavor profile though is very interesting. Up the front, it's got that malty sweetness, of course. It is Vienna malt, it is a caramelized malt, it's got that kind of Munich quality coming through. But on the back end, it actually lightens up quite a lot, and then has like a honey-like character that comes through to the forefront, which is very reminiscent of the Czech Pilsner, which had those lighter honey qualities, but it is similar. It's light honey bordering on toffee, maybe a very light caramel that comes through. So I have to expect that not only is that the Vienna malt, that's very also likely the double decoction effect, creating that light kind of sweetness. And at the back of all of that, we have that Tetnung coming through. Very traditional herbal qualities, herbal hop aroma character, but that coupled with the sulfate to chloride ratio makes it a very surprisingly light, refreshing beer. For most of the malty beers and the malty lagers I make, I'm gonna have either a balanced soft water profile or a malty water profile. This is a flipped script and it shows, but it's not showing in the way that I expected. I actually really like it. It makes the body feel lighter, but it makes the finish extremely dry. It's got that thirst quenching effect that lawnmower beers have, where you're in the hot sun, you're mowing the lawn, you come and smash a tinny, and you head straight back out. This has kind of got those qualities because of that sulfate ratio. It does make it feel slightly more bitter than it probably is, but it makes it extremely refreshing, especially considering this is such a malty beer. So all in all, I call this an absolute success on the beer front and a really cool success to make a more historical variety that's not really around today. The Vienna is, but this is the 19th century Vienna, and I'm very, very happy we went traditional on this one. And whilst I enjoy this beer, I need to say a massive thank you to our Patreons. This is the first time in 2026 that I get to thank you guys. Thank you ever so much. It is an absolute thriving community over there now. We've been chatting a lot over the Christmas break and the start of the year, talking about what beers we want to come out this year. We've already decided on a schedule for the next couple of brew days. So if you guys do want to get a part of the conversation and just join our community, the Wombat brewing community, come and check out our Patreon and the link down below. We are having a lot of chats over there now around just what each other are doing, brewing ideas and new recipes that we want to explore on the channel this year. So thank you guys. I don't have a hint for next week's video. I can't remember what it's going to be, but if you want to let us know what beers you want us to brew this year, comment down below and we'll add it to the list. Cheers. Catch you next time.